Oberst Friedrich Lang circled the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt like a wolf examining wounded prey. The captured American fighter sat in the hangar, its olive-drab paint scarred by flak damage. Lang had flown 247 combat missions. He'd dueled Spitfires over Dover, Yaks over Stalingrad. He knew metal and aerodynamics the way a surgeon knows arteries. "It's a cow," he said, running his hand along the fuselage. 7 tons fully loaded. They built a fighter that weighs more than our medium bombers. His engineering team crowded around with clipboards and measuring tapes. The numbers confirmed what their eyes already told them. 4,900 pounds. Empty weight. The Focke-Wulf 190 they'd been dominating the skies with? 3,200 pounds. The math was brutal. Test pilot Hauptmann Werner Schwarz kicked the massive Pratt, and Whitney R2800 engine cowling. 2,000 horsepower just to haul this pig off the ground. Look at the wing loading. 38 pounds per square foot. Our 190 is 29. This thing will turn like a freight train. Lang nodded, making notes. The intelligence briefings had been clear. American pilots called it the Jug, short for Juggernaut, they claimed, but everyone knew it was really because the thing looked like a milk jug. Bloated, graceless. The fuselage was as wide as a barrel. "Roll rate?" Lang asked. "We'll test tomorrow, but preliminary analysis suggests poor. That bubble canopy is heavy. The control surfaces are massive just to move this weight around." Schwarz consulted his notes. "The Americans are sending these to replace the P-38s and P-51s. If this is their frontline fighter now, the Reichsmarschall will be pleased." Lang permitted himself a thin smile. "Schedule 6 test flights. I want turn radius, climb rate, dive performance, everything. Then we'll draft the tactical recommendations for our pilots." The room buzzed with confidence. They'd analyzed the P-51 Mustang. Dangerous, yes, but light, delicate, vulnerable to damage. They'd documented the P-38 Lightning. Fast in a straight line, but awkward in a turning fight. And those Allison engines quit at high altitude. But this was a gift. "The 8th Air Force is sending these information packages of 200 or more," Lang said. "Heavy fighter escorts. They clearly don't trust them in individual combat. Gentlemen, our pilots will carve through these formations like—" He paused. Through the hangar window he could see contrails forming high over Berlin. American contrails. B-17 raids, daily now, bleeding Germany's cities. "We'll have the advantage analysis ready in 72 hours, he finished. "The Führer himself will receive this briefing." What Oberst Lang didn't know, what the carefully calibrated instruments and Prussian precision of the Luftwaffe Test Center couldn't measure, was that the pilot who'd been flying that specific P-47 before it was damaged and captured had named it Devastating Donna. In 43 combat missions, that pilot, Captain Robert Johnson, had scored 12 confirmed defeats. The P-47 they were examining? It was the gentlest, most forgiving example of the breed. They had captured a trainer's airplane, flown by a replacement pilot on his 3rd mission. And 300 miles west, over the English Channel, 194 Thunderbolts were warming up their engines for a sweep over Holland that would rewrite every equation in Lang's notebook. The Luftwaffe's entire tactical doctrine was about to collide with 7 tons of American fury. They just didn't know it yet. Boxted Airfield, Essex, England. October 7th, 1943. 0540 hours. Lieutenant Francis Gabby Gabreski couldn't feel his toes. The temperature inside the unheated barracks hovered around 34 degrees Fahrenheit, and the British morning fog rolled through gaps in the walls like smoke. He'd been in England for 11 months. He'd logged 149 combat hours, and for 11 months, people had been telling him the P-47 was wrong. The criticism came from everywhere. British pilots at the pub in Colchester would snicker over warm beer. You Yanks brought a lorry to a knife fight. American bomber crews had it worse. They watched P-47 escort groups turn back at the German border because the jugs guzzled fuel like water. "Where's our little friends?" became a bitter joke at 25,000 feet while Me-109 shredded their formations. Gabreski pulled on 3 layers: thermal underwear, wool uniform, leather jacket. Still cold. He thought about his father's steel mill in Oil City, Pennsylvania. At least that had been warm. He thought about the P-40 he'd trained on, nimble and light. He thought about every tactical briefing that concluded with, "Don't turn with the 109s. Don't turn with the 190s. Use your speed, use your dive, run away, and come back." "We're building our entire doctrine around running away," he'd complained to his squadron commander last week. "We're building doctrine around surviving," came the response. "The 56th has lost 23 pilots in 5 months. The P-47 brings them home, sometimes with 200 bullet holes, but it brings them home." Outside, the flight line was waking up. Crew chiefs materialized from the fog like ghosts, hauling fuel hoses and ammunition belts. Each P-47 needed 305 gallons of fuel. Each gun needed 425 rounds per barrel. 8 guns. 3,400 rounds total. 1,700 pounds of ammunition alone. Gabreski found his aircraft. Number 61, plug money painted on the nose, and ran his pre-flight check. The R2800 engine dominated everything. 18 cylinders arranged in 2 rows, each cylinder the size of a coffee can. This engine powered the C-47 cargo plane. It powered Navy torpedo bombers. Republic Aviation had basically strapped a fighter cockpit to a bomber engine and called it a day. His crew chief, Sergeant Mike Quirk, was elbow-deep in the engine cowling. "Oil pressure good?" Gabreski asked. "She's perfect, Lieutenant. Changed the plugs last night. This bird will run so smooth you could balance a dime on the cowling at 2,000 RPM. How's the weight?" Quirk grinned. "Fully loaded? 13,500 pounds. That's 3 Cadillacs. With you in it? 3 Cadillacs and a sack of potatoes." Gabreski had stopped being offended by the weight jokes. The P-47 was objectively absurd. Republic's chief designer, Alexander Kartveli, had apparently asked himself, what if we made a fighter that could survive literally anything? The answer was brutal simplicity. Make everything bigger, heavier, stronger. The fuselage was a semi-monocoque structure with armor plate behind the pilot, armor plate under the pilot, armor plate protecting the oil cooler. The engine had a turbo supercharger the size of a trash can mounted in the tail, connected by ducts that ran the length of the fuselage. One pilot had taken 21 20mm cannon rounds through the fuselage and landed safely. Another had collided with an Me-109, the German fighter disintegrated, and the P-47 flew home with a missing wingtip. But here's what the designers couldn't armor plate: reputation. "Bomber pilots think we're cowards," Quirk said quietly, securing the cowling. "I heard it yesterday at the commissary. A B-17 waist gunner called us Thunderbolt taxi service, good for the ride to Germany, but we never stay for the fight." Gabreski felt the familiar anger rising. It wasn't cowardice. It was fuel. The P-47 burned 100 gallons per hour at combat power. Even with drop tanks, they hit bingo fuel, the point of no return, right at the German border. Meanwhile, the Luftwaffe could swarm the bombers for another 200 miles inland untouched. The 56th Fighter Group had the highest abort rate of any American fighter squadron. Not from combat damage, from fuel exhaustion. That changes today, Gabreski said. Quirk raised an eyebrow. New drop tanks? Bigger drop tanks, 108 gallons each. Plus, we're running lean mixture to the target. 1,800 RPM, 28 inches manifold pressure instead of full cruise. Republic says we can stretch our escort radius by 90 miles. 90 miles past the border. That's Osnabrück. Maybe Munster. Maybe deeper. Quirk whistled low. The Luftwaffe won't expect that. The Luftwaffe doesn't expect anything from us, except running away. The briefing at 0630 hours was standing room only. Colonel Hubert Zemke stood at the front, a wall map of Northern Europe behind him, red string showing the route. Frankfurt. They were going all the way to Frankfurt. Gentlemen, today we stop being a taxi service, Zemke said. Intelligence reports indicate the Luftwaffe has repositioned fighter groups away from the border. They're expecting us to turn back at Aachen like we always do. They're wrong. Murmurs rippled through the room. Frankfurt was 320 miles from Boxted. That was suicide range for a P-47. We'll climb to 28,000 feet over the channel. Cruise lean until we hit the IP. Initial point. Then full combat power. The bombers will be hitting Schweinfurt ball bearing factories. The Luftwaffe will commit everything to stop them. Our job is to make them commit to us first. Gabreski studied the map. The math was terrifying. If they hit headwinds, if they had to maneuver in combat for more than 8 minutes, if anything went wrong, they'd be gliding home over the North Sea. One more thing, Zemke said. New tactical guidance from 8th Air Force Headquarters. Quote, P-47 pilots are no longer restricted to escort-only engagement. You are authorized to seek and eliminate enemy aircraft using offensive tactics as conditions permit. Unquote. The room went silent. For 11 months, they'd been glorified bodyguards. Stick close to the bombers. Don't chase. Don't pursue. Don't get separated. Defensive flying. Safe flying. Boring flying. Sir, someone called out. Does that mean... It means, Zemke cut in, if you see a 109, you don't have to wait for it to shoot first. You are cleared to engage. Gabreski felt something shift in his chest. Not quite excitement, not quite fear. Something between. They'd been flying the underdog for 11 months, absorbing contempt from every direction, watching Luftwaffe pilots rack up impossible scores while American fighters turned for home. The P-47 had become a symbol of limitation. Too heavy, too slow, too thirsty, too cautious. But today they were going hunting. 28,000 feet over Aachen, Germany. 11:47 hours. The cold at altitude was beyond description. -40 degrees Fahrenheit. The cockpit heater in Gabreski's P-47 struggled to keep frost off the inside of the canopy. His oxygen mask crackled with ice around the seal. Below, Germany spread out like a topographical map. Fields, forests, the Rhine River cutting silver through autumn colors. 61 Thunderbolts from the 56th Fighter Group flew in staggered formation, each aircraft separated by 200 feet of thin air. They dropped their external fuel tanks 5 minutes ago. 216 gallons of fuel tumbling away, empty. Now they were operating on internal tanks only. 18 minutes of combat endurance before bingo fuel forced them home. Gabreski's radio crackled. Keyworth Blue Leader. This is Greenhouse. Bandits, many bandits. Angels 25. Vector 090. 15 miles. Angels 25. 25,000 feet. The Luftwaffe was coming up to meet them. Blue Flight, Acknowledge. Gabreski transmitted. Check your mixtures. Full rich. Turbo to maximum boost. Gun sight on. He reached forward and flipped switches. The N9 optical gun sight glowed orange, projecting a reticle onto the windscreen. His thumb found the gun charging handles. 8 of them, 4 per side, each one arming a Browning M2.50 caliber machine gun. The sound of charging handles slamming home echoed through the cockpit. Mechanical, final. This was the moment everyone said the P-47 would fail. Outnumbered, deep over enemy territory, with German fighters climbing to intercept. The textbook said, "Maintain formation, protect the bombers, survive." Zemke's voice cut through the radio. "All Keyworth flights, we have visual on bandits. Estimate 40 plus, mixed 109s and 190s. Tactical instruction. Flights of 4 will execute separation maneuver Baker 3. Authorization, weapons free." Gabreski's heart rate spiked. Baker 3 wasn't defensive flying. Baker 3 was an attack formation. The Luftwaffe fighters appeared as dark specks against clouds, rising fast. Me-109G6S, the latest variant, with 20mm cannons and boosted engines. Focke-Wulf 190A5S, roll rate champions, killers in close combat. 40 German fighters, 61 American. But here's what Oberst Lang's analysis at Rechlin had missed. The P-47 wasn't designed to be light. It was designed to be relentless. "Blue flight, we're going in," Gabreski transmitted. "Target the 190 formation left side. Speed is life, gentlemen. Hit them fast." He pushed the throttle to the firewall, 2,550 RPM. 52 inches of manifold pressure. The R2800 engine roared, and the P-47 accelerated like gravity had reversed. This was the secret everyone overlooked. 7 tons in level flight was a cow, yes. But 7 tons in a dive with 2,000 horsepower behind it became a meteor. Airspeed indicator, 280 knots, 320, 380. The Thunderbolt punched through 400 knots, 460 miles per hour, and kept accelerating. The wings began to vibrate. The control stick stiffened under compression loads. Gabreski's vision tunneled as G-forces built. The Focke-Wulf formation scattered. They'd never seen anything that size move that fast. Gabreski lined up on a 190 attempting a climbing turn. The German pilot probably expected the P-47 to wallow, to bleed speed in the turn. Standard fighter doctrine. Heavy aircraft can't maneuver. But the P-47 didn't turn like a heavy aircraft. It turned like a bank vault with hydraulic boosted controls. The public had installed hydraulically assisted ailerons. Pumps driven by the engine, multiplying the pilot's control inputs. At high speed, the P-47's controls were light, responsive, and devastatingly fast. Gabreski pulled 4 Gs, then 5. The 190 filled his gun sight. He pressed the trigger. 8.50 caliber machine guns fired simultaneously. 800 rounds per minute. Per gun. 6,400 rounds per minute total. The recoil shook the entire aircraft. Tracers arced out in a cone of fire, and the Focke-Wulf came apart. Pieces of cowling, chunks of canopy, a spinning propeller blade. The German fighter tumbled toward Earth, trailing black smoke. "Blue 2! Splash 1! 190!" someone screamed over the radio. "Blue 4! I've got 2 on me!" "Brake right! Brake right!" The sky became chaos. P-47s dove through Luftwaffe formations at speeds the German pilots couldn't process. One Thunderbolt pilot misjudged his dive and clipped an Me-109's tail with his wingtip. The 109 disintegrated, and the P-47 pilot radioed, "Minor damage, staying in the fight." That's when the Luftwaffe made their fatal mistake. They tried to run. Standard defensive tactic. If you can't outturn an enemy, outclimb them or outdive them. The Me-109 had excellent climb rate. The doctrine was clear. Engage, disengage vertically, reposition. But the P-47 could dive faster than any fighter in the European theater. Faster than the 109, faster than the 190, faster than the British Spitfire or the German TA-152. When Republic designed the aircraft, they'd built the fuselage structure to withstand 12 Gs. The wing spars were solid forgings. The engine mounts were borrowed from bombers. This thing could take stress that would rip other fighters into confetti. Gabreski watched an Me-109 nose over into a vertical dive, trying to escape. He followed. Airspeed 450 knots, 480, 500. The P-47's dive brakes, essentially speed limiters, were rated to 550 knots. He wasn't even close to structural limits. The 109 pilot pulled out at 8,000 feet, too early. Gabreski stayed in the dive until 4,000 feet, leveled out directly behind the German, and opened fire from 200 yards. The 109's engine exploded and the aircraft cartwheeled into a forest. "This is Keyworth Leader," Zemke's voice cut through the radio chaos. "All flights, reform on me. We've got separation from the bomber stream. Time to earn our pay." Gabreski glanced at his fuel gauge. 11 minutes until bingo. 11 minutes to rewrite the rulebook. What the Luftwaffe didn't understand, what Oberst Lang's captured P-47 couldn't reveal, was that Republic Aviation had built a fighter around a single, radical idea. Make it survive everything, then teach pilots to weaponize that survival. The P-47 couldn't outturn a 109 in a flat scissors maneuver. True, but it could dive away, extend to 3 miles, climb back to altitude, and re-engage before the 109 pilot even finished his victory roll. Again and again. Forever. Until the German ran out of ammunition, or fuel, or will. It couldn't outclimb a 190 in a vertical zoom. True. But it could absorb 20mm cannon hits, keep flying, then chase the 190 down in a shallow dive, where the American power-to-weight ratio became dominant. Every traditional measure of fighter performance, wing loading, thrust-to-weight, turn radius, said the P-47 should lose. And for 11 months, American tacticians had believed those numbers. But combat isn't fought on spreadsheets. "Blue flight, vectors to bomber stream," Gabreski transmitted. "We're not done yet." Below, German villages looked like toys. Above, contrails marked where B-17Es pressed toward Schweinfurt. And between, 43 remaining Luftwaffe fighters were reforming, confused, trying to understand why their easy targets had suddenly become apex predators. The Germans had analyzed a captured P-47 and concluded slow, heavy, vulnerable. They'd analyzed wrong, because the Thunderbolt wasn't vulnerable. It was inevitable. Rechlin Test Center, Germany. October 12, 1943. 08:20 hours. Oberst Friedrich Lang read the combat loss reports for the 4th time. His coffee had gone cold. The numbers refused to make sense. October 8th. 47 Luftwaffe fighters lost in engagements with P-47 escort groups over Western Germany. American losses. 3 P-47s confirmed destroyed. October 9th, 38 Luftwaffe fighters lost. American losses, 5 P-47s. October 10th, 52 Luftwaffe fighters lost. American losses, 2 P-47s. 3 days. 137 German fighters eliminated. 10 American fighters lost. A defeat ratio of 13.7 to 1. "This is impossible," Lang said aloud. Hauptmann Werner Schwarz sat across the desk, his own stack of reports. The lost reports match testimony from surviving pilots. Jagdgeschwader 26 lost 9 aircraft yesterday. 7 pilots dead, 2 wounded. The Americans are pursuing into clouds, into dives, into turning fights. They're not running anymore. The aircraft is too heavy to do what these reports describe. I know. The wing loading is wrong. The power curve doesn't support sustained high-speed maneuvering. I know. Lang threw the reports on his desk. Then explained this. Schwarz produced a photograph. Grainy, taken from a gun camera. It showed a P-47 in a near-vertical dive, wings bent upward under aerodynamic load, chasing an Me-109 that was clearly pulling maximum G-force to evade. The angle of attack on the P-47's wings suggested it was exceeding 500 knots, 575 miles per hour. This was taken yesterday by Lieutenant Hartmann before he was shot down, Schwarz said. He tried to escape by diving. The P-47 followed him down from 24,000 feet to 2,000 feet. At that speed, Hartmann couldn't pull out hard without blacking out. The American pulled out, got behind him, and he gestured. The rest was obvious. Lang studied the photo. What's the terminal velocity of an Me-109 in a dive? Approximately 470 knots before structural failure. And the P-47? We tested our captured example to 420 knots before we terminated the dive test. The aircraft was structurally sound, but we didn't want to risk losing it. Lang felt something cold settle in his stomach. What if we were too conservative? Sir, what if the aircraft can dive faster than we tested? What if the Americans are willing to push it to limits we wouldn't? Schwarz hesitated. Then we've been analyzing the wrong performance envelope. A knock at the door interrupted them. An intelligence officer entered carrying a decoded message intercept. Sir, we've decrypted American radio traffic from the October 10th engagement. It's unusual. Lang took the transcript. Blue 3, you're cleared to pursue. Extend to 5 miles if needed. Copy. Extending. Target is diving through 15,000. Stay with him. You've got the fuel. Target leveling at 4,000. I'm at 520 knots. Closing. Guns, guns, guns. Target is smoking. Shoot, shoot, shoot. Splash 1109. Lang read it 3 times. 520 knots. That's not possible in combat maneuvering. There are 17 similar intercepts from that day alone, the intelligence officer said. American P-47 pilots reporting dive speeds between 480 and 530 knots. And they're not just diving, they're maneuvering at those speeds. Rolling, turning, firing. Schwarz stood and walked to the hangar window. Outside, their captured P-47 sat under guard, its secrets locked in metal and mathematics. We need to retest, he said quietly. Everything, dive limits, turn performance at high speed, structural tolerances. We've been testing it like a German fighter. Maybe we should test it like an American fighter. Meaning? Meaning we've been careful, conservative. We test to operational limits, then add safety margins. Maybe the Americans don't do that. Maybe they test to destruction, then back off 10%. Lang felt the tactical situation crystallizing in his mind. If the P-47 could sustain 500-plus knot dives, if it could absorb battle damage and keep fighting, if American pilots had orders to pursue aggressively rather than escort defensively. We've been preparing our pilots for the wrong fight, he said. The intelligence officer cleared his throat. There's more, sir. We've identified the American unit conducting these operations, the 56th Fighter Group, based in Essex. Their commander is Colonel Hubert Zemke. According to RAF liaison reports, His pilots call themselves Zemke's Wolfpack. Wolfpack. Lang tasted the word. It was accurate. Pack tactics, coordinated aggression, not defense. They've been assigned extended-range drop tanks, the intelligence officer continued. 8th Air Force has extended their escort radius to Munster, possibly beyond. Our fighters can no longer engage the bomber streams beyond the border and expect the escorts to turn back. Schwartz returned to the desk. We need to brief Jagdgeschwader commanders immediately. Current tactical doctrine is getting our pilots eliminated. What do we tell them? Lang snapped. Don't dive? Don't run? The P-47 is faster than we thought, heavier than we expected, and apparently invulnerable to everything except direct 30mm cannon hits? We tell them the truth. The Americans aren't flying defensively anymore. Lang stood and walked to the map of Western Europe on his wall. Red pins marked Luftwaffe fighter bases. Blue pins marked known American fighter groups. For months, the red pins had dominated. Interior position, short response time, home field advantage. But now, blue pins were penetrating deeper each day. Schedule an emergency tactical conference, Lang ordered. All Jagdgeschwader commanders, tomorrow morning. I want every squadron leader, every group commander. We're rewriting engagement protocols. What's the new doctrine, sir? Lang stared at the map. 3 days. 137 fighters lost. The Americans had done something remarkable. They'd taken an aircraft everyone dismissed as mediocre and turned it into a strategic weapon by simply refusing to fight the way the Germans expected. The new doctrine, Lang said slowly, is that we can't afford to fight the P-47 on its terms. We avoid high-speed engagements. We avoid diving combat. We engage only when we have altitude advantage and can dictate the terms of combat. That's a defensive doctrine, sir. Yes. The room fell silent. Defensive doctrine. The Luftwaffe. Defenders of the Reich. Forced into caution by American jugs. How did this happen? Schwartz asked, almost to himself. We analyzed the aircraft. We tested it. The numbers said what we wanted them to say, Lang interrupted. We looked at wing loading and assumed limitation. We looked at weight and assumed vulnerability. We saw what we expected to see. He picked up the gun camera photo again, studying the bent wings of the diving P-47, the desperate Me-109 trying to evade. We tested their aircraft, Lang continued, but we didn't test their pilots, or their tactics, or their willingness to push beyond what we considered rational limits. Another knock. A radio operator entered, breathless. Sir, we're receiving reports from Jagdgeschwader 11. A major engagement over Schweinfurt, American bomber formation with heavy P-47 escort. Initial contact. 42 German fighters committed. Current tally. He checked his notes. 18 German fighters lost. 3 P-47s damaged. All returned to base. Lang felt the weight of command settle on his shoulders. 3 days ago, he'd briefed the Führer's staff that the P-47 represented a manageable threat. He'd shown them the analysis, the numbers, the confident predictions. He'd been wrong. Not because the data was wrong, not because the testing was inadequate, but because he'd analyzed the P-47 as an aircraft when he should have analyzed it as a weapons system. Aircraft plus pilot plus tactics plus willingness to absorb risk. Send the tactical conference invitations, Lang said. Mark them priority 1. And Werner? Schwartz looked up. Take our test P-47 back up. Dive test it to destruction. I want to know exactly where the structural limits are, because the Americans clearly know something we don't. As the officers filed out, Lang returned to the window. Outside, crews were prepping Focke-Wulf 190s for afternoon patrols. Beautiful aircraft. Elegant. Deadly. and suddenly inadequate. Because somewhere over the English Channel, 200 P-47 Thunderbolts were warming up their engines, loading 8 guns each with 3,400 rounds of ammunition, and preparing to escort bombers deeper into Germany than anyone thought possible. The defensive war had begun. The Luftwaffe just hadn't realized it yet. Boxted Airfield, England, November 26, 1943, 17:30 hours. Gabby Gabreski's uniform smelled of sweat, hydraulic fluid, and burnt cordite. He'd been airborne for 5 hours and 12 minutes. The longest mission of his life. His hands still shook from adrenaline as he filled out the combat report, trying to translate chaos into military bureaucracy. Enemy aircraft engaged, 6 Focke-Wulf 190s, 2 Messerschmitt 109s. Enemy aircraft destroyed, 3 confirmed, 1 probable. Friendly aircraft lost, 0. Ammunition expended, 2,840 rounds. The numbers didn't capture it. Numbers couldn't capture the moment a Luftwaffe pilot had tried to head-on pass him. The classic German tactic, 2 fighters rushing at each other at combined closure rates of 900 miles per hour. And Gabreski hadn't flinched. He'd held the trigger down, 8 guns hammering, and the 190 had broken first. Broken and died. "Gabby!" He looked up. Lieutenant Walker Bud Mahurin burst into the debriefing room, flight suit unzipped, goggles still on his forehead. "Did you hear? Zemke got 6 today. 6! One of them was a head-on pass at 400 knots. The German didn't even try to turn, just augured straight into the ground." Gabreski nodded. He'd heard the radio chatter. The 56th Fighter Group had claimed 23 German fighters destroyed that day. 23, with 2 P-47s damaged and 0 lost. The board in the operations room told the larger story. October 8 to November 26, 1943. 56th Fighter Group combat record. Sorties flown, 1,247. Enemy aircraft destroyed, 287. Enemy aircraft probable, 94. Enemy aircraft damaged, 156. Friendly aircraft lost to enemy action, 31. 287 confirmed victories in 7 weeks. The P-47, the airplane everyone said couldn't fight, was achieving victory ratios unseen since the early days of the Battle of Britain. Colonel Zemke entered the room, and everyone stood. He waved them down. "Sit! Keep writing! I want every combat report filed by 2,000 hours." He walked to the status board and studied it. 8th Air Force Intelligence confirms the Luftwaffe has changed tactics. As of last week, German fighters are under orders to avoid engagement with P-47 escorts if possible. They're focusing on bombers only, breaking contact when we pursue. Murmurs of surprise. The Luftwaffe avoiding combat. "That's a strategic victory," Zemke continued. "The Luftwaffe's mission is to destroy bombers. Our mission is to prevent that. If they're running from us to focus on the bombers, we force them into a no-win scenario. Engage us and take losses, or ignore us and let us engage them on our terms." Mahurin raised his hand. "Sir, what changed? Why are they running now?" Zemke smiled, thin and cold. "Because we stopped being polite." He gestured to the wall map, where colored strings tracked bomber routes and escort patterns. The strings now penetrated deep into Germany. Schweinfurt, Bremen, Frankfurt, even approaching Berlin. For 11 months we flew defensive escort. We stayed close to the bombers. We didn't pursue. We didn't take risks. The Luftwaffe learned our patterns and exploited them. But in October, 8th Air Force gave us new orders. Seek and eliminate. And when we started pressing the attack, when we started following them into dives and through clouds, when we proved we could catch them anywhere," he paused. "They realized the P-47 wasn't a problem to solve. It was a threat to survive." Gabreski thought about that. A threat to survive. The heaviest, most criticized fighter in the American arsenal had become the weapon that made the Luftwaffe flinch. "There's more," Zemke said. "Republic Aviation has developed a new variant, the P-47D. It has a bubble canopy for better visibility, improved engine cooling, and most importantly, under-wing racks for 150-gallon drop tanks. That extends our escort radius to 800 miles. Gentlemen, we'll be able to escort bombers to Berlin and back. Berlin, the capital, the heart of the Reich. We're getting the new birds next month," Zemke continued, "which means we have December to teach the Luftwaffe that the entire country is our territory now." Someone let out a low whistle. "One more thing," Zemke said, his voice dropping. "I received a letter this morning from a B-17 pilot, Captain Michael Harper, 391st Bomb Group. He wanted me to read it to you." He unfolded a piece of paper and read, "To the men of the 56th Fighter Group, on November 23rd, our squadron was attacked by approximately 40 German fighters over Bremen. We'd already lost 2 aircraft to flak, and we were separated from the main formation. We thought we were finished. Then 8 P-47s dove through the German formation. I watched one of your pilots stay on a 109's tail through a vertical dive, firing the entire way down, until the German hit the ground. Your pilots eliminated 11 German fighters in under 6 minutes. All of our surviving aircraft made it home. You have our eternal gratitude. You are the reason we're alive. Please keep coming. Please keep fighting. We don't call you taxis anymore. We call you saviors." The room was silent. Zemke folded the letter and set it on the briefing table. "That's why we fly. That's why we push these aircraft beyond what the engineers say is possible. That's why we accept missions that should be suicide runs and turn them into victories." He looked around the room at the exhausted pilots. "Tomorrow morning, 0600 hours, we're escorting a maximum effort raid against Solingen. The Luftwaffe will commit everything to stop it, and we're going to teach them, one more time, that the P-47 Thunderbolt is the most dangerous fighter in the sky." "Not the fastest," someone called out. "No," Zemke agreed. "Not the most maneuverable. No, not the prettiest." Laughter rippled through the room. "No," Zemke said, smiling now, "but the most dangerous. Because we don't quit, we don't run, and we don't lose." Luftwaffe Headquarters, Berlin, Germany. November 27th, 1943. 0940 hours. Oberst Friedrich Lang stood before a room full of generals and field marshals, his career hanging by a thread. The October briefing. The one where he'd confidently predicted the P-47 was a manageable threat, had become a source of bitter humor among Luftwaffe command. Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring sat in the front row, his uniform straining against his bulk, his expression somewhere between fury and exhaustion. "Explain," Göring said, "how we've lost 400 fighters in 6 weeks to an aircraft you called a cow." Lang swallowed. "Sir, our initial analysis was based on static performance metrics. We evaluated the P-47 as we would evaluate any fighter. Wing loading, power-to-weight ratio, turn radius. Those metrics were accurate. The P-47 is, objectively, a heavy aircraft with poor maneuverability in traditional dogfighting scenarios. And yet, our pilots are being slaughtered. Yes, sir, because the Americans don't fight traditional dogfights. They've developed new tactics specifically designed around the P-47's strengths." He gestured to a chart showing dive speeds. The P-47 can exceed 550 knots in a dive. 633 miles per hour. That's 100 knots faster than the ME-109's structural limit. When our pilots attempt to escape by diving, the Americans follow and eliminate them during the dive recovery phase. Goering leaned forward. Then our pilots shouldn't dive. If they don't dive, the P-47 uses altitude advantage to engage in high-speed slashing attacks. 8.50 caliber machine guns firing 6,400 rounds per minute. At 400 knots, they make a single pass, eliminate or damage the target, then extend away before we can counterattack. Then shoot them during the extension. Sir, the P-47 can absorb extraordinary battle damage and remain operational. We have documented cases of P-47s returning to base with over 200 bullet holes. The aircraft has redundant systems, armor plating, and self-sealing fuel tanks. Destroying one requires either a direct 20mm or 30mm cannon hit to the engine, or sustained fire that our pilots can't deliver before the P-47 escapes. Goering slammed his fist on the armrest. This is unacceptable. We are the Luftwaffe. We do not run from American fighters. With respect, sir, we are running. We must. The alternative is unsustainable losses. Another general, General Major Adolf Galland, stood. Oberst Lang is correct. I've spoken with our top pilots. Hartmann, Barkhorn, Rahl. They all confirm the P-47 is redrawing the tactical environment. We can no longer engage American escort fighters with confidence. We can only attempt to bypass them and attack the bombers. And when the escorts pursue, Goering demanded. Then we disengage. That's cowardice. That's survival. Galland's voice was ice. We've lost 400 fighters in 6 weeks. At that rate, we'll lose 2,000 by summer. We cannot replace pilots at that rate. We cannot replace aircraft at that rate. The Americans have unlimited production. We do not. Lang watched the room's mood shift. These were professional military officers confronting an uncomfortable truth. They were losing. What are the recommended countermeasures? Goering asked finally. Lang returned to his charts. 3 primary recommendations. First, develop new tactics focused on bomber interception only. Avoid all engagement with P-47 escorts unless we have overwhelming altitude advantage. Second, prioritize production of the Focke-Wulf TA-152 and Me-262 jet fighter. We need aircraft that can match or exceed the P-47's high-speed performance. Third, he hesitated. Third, we must acknowledge that American fighter tactics have evolved beyond our intelligence estimates. The P-47 isn't just an aircraft. It's a weapons system optimized for a specific type of warfare. High-speed, high-altitude, long-range escort missions with aggressive pursuit tactics. We built fighters for dogfighting. They built a fighter for winning. Goering stared at him. You're saying we lost? I'm saying we're losing. And if we don't adapt, we'll continue losing. The room fell silent. Outside the headquarters building, Berlin was preparing for another night of bombing. American B-17s, escorted by those cows that couldn't fight. Except they could. And they were winning. Boxted Airfield, England. April 8, 1945, 1520 hours. Gabby Gabreski walked across the tarmac toward a P-47D, its engine ticking as it cooled. The paint was chipped. The propeller blades were scarred. The fuselage had been patched in 3 places where flak had torn through. It was beautiful. The war in Europe was ending. Everyone could feel it. Berlin was surrounded. German resistance was collapsing. The Luftwaffe had effectively ceased to exist as a fighting force. What few aircraft remained were hidden or grounded for lack of fuel. Gabreski had 28 confirmed aerial victories now. He was an ace, a squadron leader, a veteran of 134 combat missions, and he owed every one of them to this ridiculous, beautiful, impossible aircraft. Colonel Zemke appeared beside him, hands in pockets. "Thinking about the early days?" Zemke asked. "Thinking about October 43, Gabreski said, "when we stopped being a taxi service and became a fighter group." Zemke nodded. "The Thunderbolt changed the war. I don't think people realize it yet. The historians will figure it out eventually." "Changed it how?" "By not quitting. Every other fighter. The Spitfire, the Me-109, the P-51, they were designed to be the best at something. Fastest, most maneuverable, longest range. The P-47 wasn't the best at anything except survival. And that turned out to be the only metric that mattered." Gabreski thought about the statistics. Over 15,000 P-47 Thunderbolts built. Over 3,700 German aircraft destroyed in air-to-air combat. Over 9,000 locomotives. 6,000 armored vehicles. 60,000 trucks destroyed in ground attack missions. The lowest loss rate of any American fighter in Europe. Republic built a fighter that brought pilots home, Zemke continued. And when you know you're flying something that can take punishment and keep flying, you fight differently, more aggressively, more confidently. The Luftwaffe never figured that out, Gabreski said. "No, they analyzed the aircraft. We analyzed the mission. Big difference." A jeep pulled up, and a young lieutenant jumped out. Fresh-faced, maybe 22 years old, carrying a clipboard. "Colonel Zemke? Sir, we've received orders from 8th Air Force. All fighter groups are transitioning to occupation duty. Effective immediately, combat operations are suspended except for defensive patrols." Zemke took the orders and read them. His face showed nothing. "Acknowledged," he said. The lieutenant saluted and drove away. Gabreski looked at the P-47 again. "What happens to them? The aircraft?" "Most will be scrapped. Some will go to Air National Guard units. Some will be sold to allied nations. France, Brazil, Mexico. But the frontline service? That's over. Feels wrong. It is wrong, but that's how it goes. We use them up, and now we move on." Gabreski ran his hand along the fuselage one last time, feeling the patches, the rivet lines, the scars. "October 8th, 1943, he said quietly. "That was the day we proved everyone wrong. The day we stopped running and started hunting." "You remember the exact date?" "I remember every date, every mission, every fight. But that one especially. Because that's when I stopped being embarrassed to fly this thing and started being proud." Zemke smiled. "You know what the German pilots called it by the end? Der Henker. The executioner? Not because it was elegant or sophisticated, because it was relentless." They stood in silence, two warriors contemplating the machine that had carried them through the war's most vicious aerial combat. "The P-51 will get the glory," Zemke said finally. "Prettier, faster, more romantic. The history books will talk about Mustangs escorting bombers to Berlin." "But we did it first." "Yes, we did it first. In aircraft, everyone said we're too heavy, too slow, too limited. And we didn't just do it. We dominated." A thought occurred to Gabreski. "Did you ever find out what happened to that German officer, the one who analyzed the captured P-47? Zemke pulled out a cigarette and lit it. Oberst Friedrich Lang. Intelligence found him in April, outside Munich. He'd been reassigned to training duty after the Luftwaffe essentially conceded they couldn't fight our escort groups. He survived the war. Did he ever figure it out? What they missed? According to the interrogation reports, he said something interesting. He said they'd analyzed the P-47 as an aircraft, but they should have analyzed it as an American aircraft, meaning they assumed we'd fly it conservatively within documented performance limits. They didn't account for us pushing it beyond those limits because we trusted it. 7 tons of trust, Gabreski said. 7 tons of trust with 8 guns and infinite ammunition. Yeah. They started walking back toward the operations building. Behind them, crew chiefs were already beginning the process of mothballing aircraft, draining fuel, preserving engines, preparing for storage or scrapping. "What's next for you?" Zemke asked. "Flying. Always flying. Maybe air transport, maybe test pilot work. But I'm not done with the sky." "Good, because the sky isn't done with you." As they reached the building, Gabreski turned back one last time. The P-47 sat on the tarmac, scarred and worn, a warrior at rest. In October 1943, German officers believed captured P-47s were weak, too heavy, too slow, too limited to be effective. They analyzed the aircraft and concluded it was vulnerable. They were wrong, because they'd analyzed the plane, not the pilots. They'd measured weight, not willpower. They'd calculated turn radius, not determination. The P-47 Thunderbolt didn't win because it was the best fighter in the war. It won because it was the best fighter for the war. Durable enough to survive, powerful enough to dominate, and versatile enough to adapt. 7 tons of American ingenuity that rewrote the rules of aerial combat. And 11 months after everyone said it couldn't work, it escorted the final bomber raids of World War II all the way to Berlin and back. Not bad for a cow. Epilogue. The Republic P-47. Thunderbolt served until 1955 in U.S. Air Force units and continued flying with foreign air forces into the 1960s. Total production: 15,686 aircraft, making it one of the most produced fighters in history. Final tally of Thunderbolt achievements: 3,752 German aircraft destroyed in air-to-air combat, 9,000 locomotives destroyed, 86,000 railway cars destroyed, 6,000 armored vehicles destroyed, 68,000 trucks destroyed. Loss rate: 0.7 per 1,000 sorties. The lowest of any American fighter in the European theater. Oberst Friedrich Lang survived the war and worked as an aviation consultant until his death in 1989. In a 1977 interview, he said, "We made many mistakes in the war, but the P-47 analysis was the one that taught me the most. We saw what we expected to see, not what was there. The Americans saw what was there and made it work. That is the difference between losing and winning." Francis Gabby Gabreski ended the war with 28 confirmed aerial victories, making him the top American fighter ace in Europe. He continued flying, eventually shooting down 6.5 aircraft in the Korean War, flying F-86 Sabres, bringing his total to 34.5 confirmed victories. He retired as a colonel in 1967. Colonel Hubert Zemke's 56th Fighter Group, Zemke's Wolfpack, was the highest-scoring fighter group in the 8th Air Force, with 674.5 confirmed aerial victories. The P-47 Thunderbolt, dismissed as too heavy, too slow, too limited. Final verdict: unstoppable.